Hi everyone, this is Tanya with Flying Dog Studio. Thank you so much for joining me as I do a little watercolor piece that I'm going to try to make it vintage, kind of reminiscent of Beatrix Potter. You'll see what I mean when we get to the end. And I'm using a paper I haven't used in a while. This is cold press paper and it has a little bit of a texture, but not as much as what I generally like. I'll have all of that listed below for you along with links. Here are my brushes. I'm using the size 8 round from the Royal and Langnickel Zen series, and then these two little blue handled brushes are from Winsor & Newton's Cotman series. I have a size 6 and a size 3 round. I have a cloth just in case I need to wipe my brush, a cup of water, and the watercolors I'm using are also Winsor & Newton. Well, this isn't the case that they came in. I actually prefer this one, the little kind of the mixing areas to the sides, better than the Winsor & Newton case that it came in. So, but it's still the Winsor & Newton watercolors. I'll list my set down below. As you can see, I've already pre-drawn it. So I'm coming in and I'm going to kind of knock that back with a kneaded eraser. Since I'm using watercolor, I don't want the lines to be too dark and I'm rather heavy-handed when I draw. So let's get started. This is from the Derwent Ink Tint set is Baked Earth. I'm using this to give it that vintage look. And used to I use tea, but that's kind of acid. And one of you had mentioned that you use Derwent ink tints to get the tea effect, and you know, she was totally right. So that's what I'm doing as well. And now we're going to activate it. As you can see, there's a little green up there at the top. I put down Baked Earth, it's brown. Unfortunately, my brush was not quite as clean as I had hoped, and so I got a little transfer there, but that's okay. It didn't hurt my feelings. We're just going to keep going. Normally, I would choose a flat brush for this, but I chose the Royal and Langnickel. While it does hold quite a bit of water, it's a smaller round brush, and it's not really what I needed for the job if I wanted something smooth, but I didn't. I wanted these choppy areas so that it would give it kind of an aged look, and it did. Okay, here we had a little bit of a problem. My camera stopped, and you can see it's kind of jumped ahead here. I have already my undercolors laid down, so let's talk about what I did before the camera stopped. So sorry about that, but you know, things happen. They just happen. So I used the size 6 round from Winsor & Newton because it doesn't hold quite as much water. Then I got some water, put it in my palette, and I'll have the colors up on the screen for you that I used, but I wanted a little bit of red and a little bit of the green, and I wanted just to lay down some undercolor on here. I didn't want to really mix any colors. Those are the ones I used, and again, they're up on the screen for you. Just wanted to lay down some base colors before I get started. Now, let's talk about the paper because that's something I didn't get a chance to tell you. It cut off. You can see that I taped it around the edge, but I didn't tape it down to anything. Normally, I tape it down to my desk. I don't like taping it to a board. I like the aesthetic of my desk, so I put it around the edge to give me a border, and also it helps to keep your paper flat. It does, just trust me. Now, here are the other products that we're going to be using. Again, Winsor & Newton, and these are the watercolor pencils. I have burnt carmine, then I have some olive green. We're using 4 right now. Cocoa, and then finally caramel. I'm going to add another one in, but I'll let you know when I do that. I'll let you know on the screen every time I switch colors. I try to hold those up and slow it down. Now we're starting with the olive green. And I'm sure you're wondering, why didn't you just use your pans, Tanya? They're setting right there. Why switch over to the watercolor pencils? Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, I wanted to see if I could get a Beatrix Potter vintage look on this floral piece by combining the two. And since I already have the Winsor & Newton watercolor pans, why not use their pencils and just see how the two work together? And number 2, I wanted to see how long it would take. Now, granted, the last piece I did that was completely watercolor pencil was a pile of rocks, and it took a really long time. And one of you even mentioned, I have the watercolor pencils, but they take so long, I just don't grab them. I would rather use like a Caran d'Ache Neocolor Color 2s, and I agree. colored pencils take a long time. Whether you're using them like traditional colored pencils or you're using watercolor pencils, they take a long time. But I think they do have their purpose, and that's the second reason. I wanted to see how long it would take to do this piece and how well these colored pencils would work for getting the detail. To add more color in, because that's what I'm going to do. Some of it I'm going to activate. What I'm putting down right now, I will be activating. But then I'll come back at the end and I will add a layer that I'm not going to activate. I'm just going to leave it like colored pencil. I haven't done that yet with any of my pieces, and I wanted to see how the two would look together. So that is the whole purpose for this. If you go to look for the reference photo that I used on this, mentioned earlier, it's from Unsplash, and Annie Spratt is the photographer, and for some reason I'm always drawn to her work. It doesn't even have to have her name on it. I'm just drawn to it, and I look and I go, yeah, of course it's hers. I'm just drawn to her photography. But these were, and I say these because this was actually from a larger piece that had 4 different tulips on there. Now, I did show you, let me interrupt myself here. I am using the Winsor & Newton brush because it doesn't hold quite as much water. When you are activating these, that's kind of important, not to use a whole lot of water. It's going to keep your color from being picked up by your brush, and it's going to keep it from spreading around so much. So if you want to keep it in a certain area, use something that's not going to be holding a lot of water. And you will see me accidentally get some extra water later on, and I have to kind of dab that up with the rag. So you want to kind of watch your water control when you're using these, whether on top of other watercolor or by themselves. But back to the photo that I used. This came from a larger piece. I just pulled one tulip out, and I only drew that tulip. I'll have that linked below so you can take a look at the whole thing if you want to follow along, or if you want to do your own piece or the whole thing. But they are kind of transparent, and I like that about it because it reminded me of a Beatrix Potter piece over on the Victoria and Albert website, which I'll link down below so you can take a look at some Beatrix Potter stuff if you want to. But I'll also have that picture at the end of the video so you can compare the two once I get some more color on here, because right now it might not make sense, but I think it will once we get all of the color added. So this is my process right now. I'm going to be adding the colors on, and you're going to see me add some, I believe I add some caramel on top of the olive green here on the stem, and then I activate it. So I'm going to be mixing it right on here. I'm not going to put a layer down, let it dry, then put another layer. I'm going to go ahead and layer the colors on here just as if I were using regular colored pencils. That's how I would do it. I'm going to activate it, and I'm going to keep moving around the flower. So I'm going to let you have a little musical interlude and take a break from my gabbing, and then I'll hop back on in just a minute and we'll talk some more. I'm coming back with the burnt carmine on top, and you may have noticed how in some areas I'm really applying pressure, and in other areas I'm kind of lessening up the pressure. I'm getting some shading in, and the reason I'm doing that is because those areas where I'm putting the most pressure, and you probably noticed that on the little leaf on the stem as it goes up into the tulip, that where I put the most pressure, that's the area that's going to have the higher concentration of color, and that's what I want. I'm using this to get detail. So this is my detail on this piece. It's a very simple piece. There are not a lot of intricate areas on it, but I am able to get the detail by putting in some lights and some darks. So that's how we're using these in this piece. But I also think they would be fabulous for putting like some of that minute detail in on some pieces. The trick to any colored pencil, and I always said this to my students, is to keep it sharp. So right now, using this kind of paper, with it having a little bit more of a texture, not being totally smooth, it will wear down that point more quickly. What you're not seeing is when I come back at the end, once everything's dry, and add on the final detail, I have sharpened my pencils. Okay, now we're adding the water, and I do it in a particular way. You saw at that point I wanted to get that point, that detail in. I've switched to the size 3 just to make sure I don't have too much water in my brush, and to make certain I can get all the fine detail areas. So that's why I switched to that one. Now I'm coming back and I'm going to activate all of the high color areas, but when I'm wanting to get to an area where the color is not as intense, you can see I'm starting with a clean brush. I got a little too much water. There we go. That was the part I think I mentioned that earlier. So I'm starting there with a clean brush with water, and then I'm moving toward the heavier color. That kind of pushes it down and keeps it from getting in those light areas where I'm wanting a highlight. And you can always come back and drag that color up and get a little more detail. So I really liked these for doing the detail. And if you've never tried the Winsor & Newton colors, I do recommend that you do so. Now, the set that I got, I'm not even going to list that one. I'm just going to list, I think it's their 64 set of these, because it's only $20 more and you get more colors. The one I got was like a curated set, so it had repeated colors in it, and I don't recommend that. Just go, you're going to love them. If you've never tried them, you'll love them. Go ahead and get the bigger set and get all the colors. I wish that's what I had done, because they're really great. So we're going to finish with this, and then I'm going to come back. I'm going to let it dry completely. You're not going to see that on the screen, but I'm going to let it dry completely. Then I'm going to come back and get some detail. Okay, here it is, completely dry, and you can see it has kind of a vintage look to it. All the tape is off. I don't need that anymore. And here is the color that I'm adding in. It's called Lush Green, because the areas right in here where there was like a little hole in the leaf and some darker areas where it was curled around, it had almost a blue-green and not just that olive green color to it. So I'm starting, and you can see again how sharp that point is. You don't see me sharpen them off screen, but that's what I did. Then I'm going to come back and put that olive green right on top. Everything I'm doing now, this is the final detail, and I wouldn't call this, I was talking about the minute details, like intricate details, if you have a real intricate piece. This is similar to that, but I really wouldn't call it that, because there are only a few places that I'm really having to like bear down and get any kind of detail on. But you can see it would be great for doing that, but I'm not going to activate any of this. From now on, any pencil I put down on here is just going to remain colored pencil. And it's very handy, especially like in this area where I'm putting the veins down. I don't have a super steady hand anymore. So when I'm trying to do that with a watercolor brush, it's either going to be too thick or it's not going to be dark enough. And with this, it was very easy to get the detail. So if you don't have the watercolor pencils and you don't want to really invest in it, not knowing if you're going to use them a lot, if you have just colored pencils, do that. Go ahead and do your piece in watercolor and then come back and put the regular colored pencils on top. you can probably match up the colors very well. They don't have to be the same brand like I have. Now here is that Beatrix Potter piece on the left hand side I was telling you about that I remembered. You can see how using these pencils it's giving me the same kind of lines that she had. Plus it's a little transparent. You can see the background through there, and that's what I wanted, to be able to see some of that background coming through, and it gives it that aged effect. So overall, I would highly recommend, if you don't have watercolor pencils, that's fine. Use regular colored pencils. But I would highly recommend putting the colored pencils in with your watercolor. It's going to help a lot getting those details. And that is always a plus. Well, if you are new to the channel, thank you so much for joining. I hope you'll subscribe. And if you are a regular attender to my little art projects, thank you so much. I'm always happy when you're here. Well, that's it for this piece, guys, and I will have some more similar to this. I also have something coming up in my Wonder Journal. I hope you'll join me for that. But until then, my friends, I will see you in the next one.